You're listening to Productivity Protected, the podcast that's all about data privacy and security. We'll unpack emerging threats, hot issues in data security, and top ways to protect your data and how you work. Here's your host, Spencer Kupferman.
Welcome back to all of our listeners to the Productivity Protected podcast, Driving Data Privacy with Western Union. I'm your host, Spencer Kupferman. I'm the CEO of PKware, and it's fantastic to have Harveer Singh with us of Western Union. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We've got an awesome content packed like we always do here, Productivity Protected. Awesome guest today, very special guest. Special for a lot of reasons, but certainly special because they're the first customer, one of our flagship customers, Western Union, and not just a customer, but a strategic partner who has helped with the maturation of the PKware platform for many years in different capacities. And I'm going to introduce Harveer Singh to all of you. So thank you for tuning in the Productivity Protected podcast. We're going to talk about data privacy with one of the best in the industry. I want to welcome Harveer Singh. And before we bring Harveer on, I'm going to read his bio a little bit and tell a little bit about him. It's important. Our users love learning about our guests. It's very important that they know the background of our guests. And this guest has no shortage of credibility in this space of data privacy. Harveer Singh serves as the Chief Data Architect and Global Head of Engineering at Western Union since July 20, where he manages data platforms, data marketplace, MarTech, and ad tech platforms, digital banking integrations, loyalty platform, and several consumer financial ecosystem platforms. Harveer is a technology executive with experience spanning several industries, such as financial services, including banking, payments, insurance, capital markets, and asset management, retail, and professional services. Previously, he's been working in EY's financial services, where he currently co-leads EY's next generation architecture and solutions for financial services. Prior to EY, Harveer held various consulting roles at Deloitte, IBM, and Accenture. During his consulting tenure, he's presented and authored numerous professional point of views on loyalty, digital transformation, platforms, architecture, big data, DevOps, and engineering factories. Harveer has extensive experience in digital transformation, technology management, data architecture, governance, and platform development. He's dedicated to enabling business capabilities through continuous improvement of both data and processes, and we look forward to getting into that background. His past track record has proven success through his design and implementation of tech strategies, business cases, multi-year roadmaps, platforms, and solutions. Harveer was inducted in Forbes Technology Council in January of 2022. Congratulations for that, Harveer. Harveer also enjoys philanthropy work and is currently involved with the Western Union Foundation, the Mark Cuban Foundation, the She Jobs Initiative, and there is a host of others that I could list here. It's my honor. Excuse me. I'm humbled to be with such an accomplished executive in the data privacy, data protection space as Harveer Singh, who's been kind enough to give us his time, his partnership, and just an overall, every time I'm in the halls of PKware, his name comes up. It's such a positive influence on what we're doing at PKware, and the future of our partnership absolutely has Harveer Singh's fingerprints on that. It's my pleasure to introduce Harveer Singh. Harveer, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Spencer, for having me. And honestly, it sounded so much better than I actually ever imagined. So I was like, I want to hire that guy. It kind of made me feel good. I appreciate it. It's several years of working in different industries and working with people like you, who's kind of helped me kind of put together hats, bridge that gap between business, data, technology, and then the whole experience itself. And then in terms of the privacy part of my role, I feel that privacy should be, inducted right up from the front as something which I call it privacy by design. No platform should be developed without having that mindset. So that's kind of why my role here at Western Union became very important, because I'm sitting in the center of how our customers interact with our organization as well. So thank you for having me. I look forward for this fun conversations. PKware has been an amazing partner to us, enabling our privacy in an environment which is probably one of the most complex environments I have personally seen in my consulting careers. And I have 16 plus years of consulting experience with large Fortune 2000 companies. Western Union cannot be more easy than anything else. It's actually more complex given the span in 200 countries. So you have to have regulation in those 200 countries, the localization laws in 200 countries, the privacy laws in the 200 countries, and the various laws in various languages in 200 countries. So when you start to add up each of those metrics, the permutation combinations are so much that we needed something that can span across and scale across all of that stuff. So super excited. Thank you very much for having me. And I look forward for our conversation today.
Thank you, Harveer. It's great. Like I said, great to have you. Appreciate, like I said, all you've done thus far in our partnership. I know it's just the beginning of our partnership. There's so much more to accomplish together. And not only just for Western Union, but in this industry that we can accomplish together, helping each other as we've already helped. And so just like I said, on behalf of our board of directors and PKware, so appreciative and thankful to have partners like you out there who are, like I said, really guaranteeing our future together as partners. So thank you. And I thought on that note, we talk about Western Union, of course, that's what this is about here today. But I thought it'd be great, Harveer, for the listeners out there, when we'll just jump right in. When some of us see the Western Union logo, we see it, whether it's the advertisements we've seen on the internet, the logos. Western Union is obviously a household name. We kind of think of telegrams and wire money transfers and such. It's been exciting to see how Western Union has really endured for more than 150 years. I don't know how many of our listeners know that history. That's pretty, I thought PKware had history. We're about 30 years. We're not close to 150. So that's impressive in and of itself. But to now be the second largest money transfer provider in the world, if you could maybe just talk to our listeners a little bit about how people use Western Union today.
Sure. And so a couple of things, right? So we are 170 years old.
Oh, 100, okay.
Actually celebrated this year last year was 170th year, which is amazing to see how an organization has survived and kind of reinvented products and over again to be competitive in the marketplace. By sheer volume of the transfers, we are world's leading in how our customer base, as well as our sheer number of transfers and the volume of the money that we move around the world. So for us, Western Union is a household brand because it really tells the story of the world. The story of the world is around movement, and that movement has been very evident. Whether if you go back in the 1940s and 1950s, where there was movement from Europe into the US, or you see the tech movement from Asia coming into the US, or you see the Latin American movement into the US, or the US movement outside of the US going into maybe going to Canada, or maybe going to Europe, etc. So it really tells you a story that a human is a nomad in some way or reason. And that is one of the basic principles when a person travels or a person relocates is he needs a place to sleep, he needs to communicate, and he needs to be able to buy those things. That is where we come into play. So for the last X number of years, we have been that partner for our customers where they can safely rely on us for having them deliver funds, whether it's one way or both ways, to them or to their friends and family in some way or some form. Very simple example. I'm an immigrant. I moved from India to Australia in 2002. I went to school there. And the first thing that I needed to do was pay my tuition. And guess what? I was sent money through Western Union to actually pay my tuition fees. Then once I graduated, I needed to send money back to my parents. It was their 25th wedding anniversary. I wanted to buy them a car. That was their first car. I always like to relate it to personal experiences. My first ever transfer back home was through Western Union. I had no idea, that I would end up working for this company that, has so many personal memories attached to it. Buying a first car for your family or for your parents, it was a milestone for me as well, right? Coming from a very, average or a middle class family, we could never dream of that. So Western Union literally enabled. I remember the first time I sent it, the smile on the face that I had, the pride that I have then in myself that I'm able to do this for my parents. And now that I'm sitting inside here, I see that our customers doing that every single day across the world. For me, each of them is me doing this for their parents, for their family, for their sisters, for their brothers, for their friends, and enabling lives across the world. So for us, that itself is huge, and we take pride in it. So that's what Western Union is. But behind the scene, people don't understand. It's not just the money that moves, right? It's an engine that has so many different parts. You have the digital channel, you have the retail channel, then you have the ability to collect the funds, you have the ability to store the funds, you have the ability to send the funds, you have the ability to make sure that the customers are not being defrauded. So we want to make sure there is a risk protection, there's fraud protection, there is the and then to top it all, there is the X number of laws that are put in place, obviously for protection of all of us, which is anti-money laundering laws, the sanctions list, etc. All of that need to be followed. And then at that point of time, something moves and it reaches to your loved ones. And when I say something moves, ideally it's the data movement that is happening behind the scene, which enables that movement of money across the border. So with all that complexity, comes a lot of responsibility, which is because we are in each step of the way, we are collecting so much information from our customers, both on the send side as well on the receive side, that we have to ensure that it's protected. It's in the best interest of the customer, and we use it for the purpose that it's collected for. So that complexity itself, is where we take pride that we are able to do it across 200 countries. So that's what Western Union is under the hood, if you will. And in recently, we launched a digital bank in Europe. So now we are live in Germany and Romania with our digital bank offering, which has the ability for you to store your funds in 16 plus currencies and be able to transfer them instantly to your loved ones across the border. So we are going a step higher or a step ahead in anticipating that, while you are using us to, transfer funds, we are also allowing you to store those funds and exchange them for your preferred rate at any given point of time, no matter when you want to do it. Because if I know that there is something coming down the path, I have Mother's Day coming, I have my sister's birthday coming, I have, I'm from India, so I have Diwali coming, for example. I want to be able to do all of this stuff. So if I can bank on and store and save for those purposes, I should be able to remit it very quickly. So we are trying to almost become more of an ecosystem player and expanding our services to be able to our customers to store those funds in our wallets and be able to remit them very quickly. So very proud of it. We were able to build that bank in about 9 months. Fantastic experience, and look forward to scaling that out now.
Well, the best, that's a very thoughtful background on Western Union. Of course, my favorite part is, as you referenced, the personal connection. I think that's a great story and a nice treat on Productivity Protected with all of our users from around the world. That was very, very special. And I mean, congratulations to complete that circle. That is a dream come true. That's really, really fantastic. And I'm going to stick with the theme of the multi-countries you referenced. I think it was about 200 countries that Western Union there's some type of operating capacity in that many countries, which is really kind of mind-blowing in and of itself. I guess let me drill down on that a little bit. As a society, both here in the U.S. and really, I guess, around the world, consumers are becoming more savvy about their data, and where it's shared, who has it, and what they do with it. Over the past few years, we've seen a rise in privacy regulations that companies have to comply with, and you referenced a little bit of that. There's several state mandates here in the U.S. alone, multiple international mandates, as you referenced as well. How many privacy mandates does Western Union have to comply with, and how does that really challenge your systems in how you use data?
It's a very tough question to answer because two reasons. I can blindly say, yeah, maybe every country has its own regulation, so 200, but then each one of them has a different flavor to it. And when you start to put those flavors into it, it's like almost multiplies in some way or some form. I will not be doing a service if I start to take those questions around, because our privacy team does a lot more work than I probably can give them credit for. So it's a lot, I would say. If it's true, if US alone is, let's say X number of states, then globally you can only imagine how the scale would be. The other aspect of that is the ever-changing landscape. It's not just the law, but it's the ever-changing landscape. I'll give you two examples. One is, let's take India, for example. India has loose laws which can become very strict overnight. And that overnight aspect puts a havoc in terms of our infrastructure in some way or some form. So we know that India, Malaysia, China, Russia, etc., have always been, a different level, or they will always vary in some way or some form to what the US or the European Union might end up doing. And hence, we always have to keep this in mind. What can they do? Like, for example, localization is one aspect, right? India does have a localization aspect, but it's not enforced today. But tomorrow, if it starts to get enforced, then what? I cannot overnight move my data center to India. So I have to start working on those. So having that mindset in the roadmap is extremely, extremely important. So when I say privacy by design, I also want to build something that is, decoupled by design. I can decouple it when I need to, and I can couple it when I need to, right? Russia was a very big example. When Western Union decided to stop work with Russia and Belarus, we were able to overnight cut ties with our data centers in Russia and stop the process and keep everything localized. So there is absolutely no data that we have about Russians here in the US, and there is absolutely no exposure in anywhere in that farm, because we had built it in such a way that, we didn't anticipate this, but because Russia's localization laws force us to think that way, we had to do it, and that was easy for us to kind of decouple that. But that principle has been followed across to many other countries which potentially might do that. The individual rights request is an interesting one, because every country has a different flavor to it. How much can you share, or what can the consumer ask you? What can they ask you to do? As well as how much do you really need to send it to them to be able to satisfy them? There are a few different cases where, consumers have gone down to the length where they have literally put legal lawsuits against organizations to kind of drill down into nth level, figure out what they have for them. But then, the law also says that, you have to provide credible evidence that you did everything in your power to kind of do all of this stuff, to make sure that you responded accurately, you deleted accurately, et cetera, et cetera. So the laws are a little bit vague, but then also the consumer aspect is interesting, because we don't know what the consumer might say. So it becomes a very interesting challenge on how much should we invest in this versus we'll figure it out when it gets there. There are a lot of companies which say we'll figure it out when it gets there. But in our case, because we are in 200 countries, we cannot leave it to the last minute to say, we'll figure it out when we get there. So we get prepared for this, in day one. So that's where the complexity for us becomes, multiplies over and over again. EU is the same way. Our legal, we have a legal function or a privacy function here in Europe, which is constantly in touch with the European Union, with the European Parliament to respond to queries on, how we are managing, rights of the individuals. Where is the data being stored? This is a very common question that I get. Where is the data being stored? Where are you housing it? Where are you processing it? Is it anonymized, et cetera, et cetera? So a lot of that is we deal with it on a day-to-day basis.
I appreciate the sentiments of the complexities around trying to make those decisions on the fly versus a more, versus an approach that that you all have taken at Western Union, which ultimately you were prepared. Obviously, the Russia situation, like you said, wasn't planned, but you guys were obviously able to act swiftly, and so that's impressive. I wanted to, I had the opportunity, Harveer, you did a fantastic testimonial video for us with your colleague, and was able to watch that, and again, was just so grateful and humbled by all that you said about our partnership in there. And you mentioned in there, if I can, you said that about a year ago, Western Union really started to kind of dig into their data privacy processes and found that they were not automated at all. Tell the audience what, people are fascinated with businesses like Western Union, especially ones that have been around for 170 years. I want to make sure I'm correct on that, 170, not 150. Thank you for correcting me. People our listeners are fascinated with learning about these use cases. And in many cases, potentially that could inspire them as well to try to replicate some of the things you guys have done on the cutting edge in our partnership. If you could maybe describe for our listeners, what the process was like, before, how involved it was, and how long did it take?
So we had a privacy function previously that has existed for a while, but the rigor on the privacy was at a very localized level. So the European, let's say, privacy function was dealing it themselves. The US was dealing it in themselves. And then there is a rest of, the world was dealing it in a different way. So everyone was like in a siloed approach, dealing with it in different ways. Then there was a lot of the burden that was put on our customer service agents as well, which is, hey, if somebody calls, figure it out and then raise a ticket, and then somebody goes and runs X number of queries. And I was shocked to see that they're actually trying to, somebody had an Excel sheet where they put a name and then they create a variation of that name in a few different ways. And they would run those queries to find data. And then they would extract an ID and then go find that same ID in other places. And to request to do this over and over for X number of individuals, it takes forever. And the people that we interviewed with, when we started to work on this automation piece, or when we decided to kind of automate the entire privacy function, they were saying that it takes them hours and hours of work to just respond to just one query. Hey, tell me what do you have for Harveer Singh would take 8 to 10 hours just to run queries across so many different databases. So the sheer amount of wastage of talent was crazy. So the new privacy office, which is led by Craig Sharkey on our side, had two things in mind. He had a very interesting approach that he wanted to partner up with technology. He didn't want it to take on himself to solve all the problems. He's like, he came to us and says, you guys in the data space, you know the data better than I do. I know the regulations. Let's partner up and build something together. And we sat down and said, we are going to build a world-class automated piece of process that can be automated right from the start when somebody requests and when they get a response. And it has to be in a lightning speed. Again, you get X number of days. I think it's 45 days to do the request, but we wanted to cut it into like less than 4 hours. Put the request in, within 4 hours, you'll get your report. Why not? If it's completely automated. The other thing that I did also was we didn't, when again, we sat down with your team, and I had exposure to your team prior to coming into Western Union. And so I knew about the software, I knew what it can do. And we also knew that there are certain pieces that you guys don't do. And we also tried to figure out, okay, we sat down with you guys and say, okay, where can you play a role in this? And then how do we augment other possible pieces of software to really build an end-to-end solution? Because most of the time what I feel is, and again, software vendors will come and promise you we can solve for world peace and hunger. It wasn't the case in your case. The team clearly went and looked at a design and say, first of all, they said, you guys are crazy. Nobody's done this before. I'm like, thank you. I appreciate the challenge. Now let's do it together. So we brought the team in-house. We brought a vendor in-house, Quant Systems. We kind of built that from right day one. We worked with the privacy office. We worked with the people who were actually running these queries, understanding. Then we went ahead and started to acquire a master data tool as well, which could do the fuzzy logic, etc. So right now the team actually is working on integrating that in the master data tool itself. So for us, the desire is when somebody requests something, the first thing is you look into the master data system, do all the fuzzy matching logic, whatever it is. And at that point of time, the tentacles goes out, collects the data and sends it back. That should be your entry and exit point. I don't want to scan thousands of systems. The systems are being scanned quietly under the hood, which is our global scanning function that is already enabled. It should already be scanned. So every time a new database comes on board or a new folder comes on board, like a box folder comes on board, that's a future functionality, but an S3 bucket comes on board, the first thing that they have to do is subscribe to a scanning. If you're not subscribing, then I'm not letting you provision as well. So that's kind of by design that we are building that as well. So that was the mindset. And then in addition to that, now we are actually looking into integrating the PKWare result set into our metadata tool to even enrich that better, so that our privacy officer does not have to go into two different tools to look at what is our catalog and how does it relate to, what is the PII information, what is the sensitivity of, what does my exposure look like. We want to build a single, view into that. And now, so right now we are working with your team to kind of build those APIs into our catalog function as well, to take this product to the next level as well. So, I feel that, your team has allowed us to become engineers ourselves and looking into the under the hood and advising them as well. And they've taken the feedback very seriously. So we are seeing amazing results, and we are now fully automated on our ServiceNow platform, which is completely automated with PKWare from a global scanning as well as rights management function in many countries.
I love that story. I could probably listen to it for another 3 hours because it's, the concept of these vendor customer relationships is, it's not a given when you're trying to solve such complex issues around automation and data privacy, data protection, and just outright cyber hygiene. It's really the most complex issue, at least in my humble opinion. The most complex issue of our generation will be to solve the cyber hygiene disease, whether it's privacy, whether it's data protection, and all the functions that come within them. There's a reason why there's 6,000 cyber companies in the world now. And you guys had a great vision together, as you rightfully mentioned. Our people had a vision with you to solve this issue and create these automation processes around your data privacy, and made it more intuitive and more streamlined. And that's a great story. And we can talk about that for, like I said, we can talk about that for hours more. We don't have that time. I want to be respectful of your time as well. And I guess I would ask, because you've had this experience, you've taken this journey, you're taking the journey with us, and you've had other experiences before, as I rightfully mentioned in your bio. What advice? We have a lot of cyber junkies out there who love listening to the Productivity Protected podcast, who are listening in right now. Tell us maybe what advice would you give another company that might be in a similar pickle, if you will, that Western Union was, and maybe with a host of other challenges, that would, looking to really drive a level of data privacy improvement similar to what Western Union's accomplished?
Sure. My advice is it's not a very technical advice, more process. I always say put the horse before the cart. Majority of the time, it's the other way around, because I was in the consulting space for X number of years, and when I used to rock up to my client side, and they're like, "Oh, we bought this software, now make it work." It doesn't work like that. You need to define the process first. You need to define the problem first. You need to design the architecture first, and then go figure out what can solve that. It's not the other way around. Most of the time, that's the problem, right? So yes, you have 6,000 companies out there, but do you really know what your problem is at the end of the day? First, describe the problem. At least we knew our problem really well, and again, I'm talking about the TKWare suite because to start with, we knew that we had data silos. We knew we had way too much data span across multiple different databases. We knew that we were migrating from on-prem to cloud. So we need a solution that can go across on-prem as well as cloud. I needed that. And we went through a 3-month extensive exercise with you guys to prove it out. And our approach is simple. Help us with the production pilot. And I'm not saying it's a POCs don't work. Help us with the production pilot, invest some time to help us solve this problem, and then let's partner up for the next N number of years to kind of keep building on that. So having that conversation upfront is extremely important. I also wrote on Forbes, somebody asked me, is like, how do you select a software vendor? I look at 4 or 5 different things. I look at the team that is coming onto the board to help us out, which means that if it's a sales guy is only interesting to play golf, then I am not interested in because that doesn't solve my problem, because I can play golf all day, but then when I go back to work, it's the same problem that I'll be dealing with. The second thing is the skills, the sales people, if they are not educated enough about their product suite, they will never be successful. So that's number 2. So you need to have a sales team, or you need to find the right sales team that can give you that breakdown of how other customers are using the product and be intelligently able to talk, because the span of an executive is very small. And if you bring a technical guy in there, the executive will lose him within 5 seconds, because he'll start to go down. So you need to find that right balance. So you're a pseudo technical sales guys are extremely important. They're not being done in the product. I'm almost trying to give you advice, but no, that's not the case. But I look at it from that perspective. The third thing I look at is I have an extensive sheet that I go through with my business, with my ops, with my engineering, and with my business team, with my data analyst, data team. And the reason why I do this is because all of their requirements are different. The privacy group in this case, which is our business, if you will, for me, the business partner, they have unique needs versus the engineering wants to understand how it integrates well or easy to integrate, how much can come out of the box versus how much do I need to kind of build on top of it. The ops might want to understand how easy is this to maintain. Hey, do I have to build an army of people around it to maintain it? Or is it something that is easy for me to train my own people, or hire external or additional talent to help maintain it? And then finally, what is the total cost of ownership of this? I have certain tools which cost very minimal, in the low 200, 300s in terms of the pricing, but the AWS bill that I end up paying is extremely high because that's just the way it is. It just consumes too much compute. And so the value for me is, some of the people haven't really looked into that in terms of the total cost of ownership. So you need to account for that total cost of ownership in both compute, storage, as well as your human capital that you'll have to put into that. So those are my 5 criterias. And then on top of it, how much access do I have to the product team? Because I have needs that are unique. For me, having access to your product team is extremely helpful because I can pick up the call and tell them, hey, what are you guys working on in the next 6 months? And if there is something that I need, can you prioritize this, because we need it now? And the responses that I get are phenomenal. But that is where, that partnership that you talked about came in handy. So those are some of the advice. Again, this is not an advice around how to write code or do. This is more like a soft advice that look at it from that perspective, even before you proceed.
That's really, really helpful. And I'd like my entire team to watch this podcast, to just hear the answer to that last question, and those boxes that you're so vigilant about when you go through your process with a vendor are so critical. I'm happy to report I'm not a golfer. I don't play golf. I've never played golf. I don't have time for golf, and we don't solve problems on the golf course. I might lose a few listeners for saying that, Harveer, but it's worth it for you. It's worth it for you if I lose a few listeners because they think I'm hating on golf. I'm not hating on golf. I'm not a golfer. I'm not into it. But of course, respect the prowess of great golfers and those who enjoy the sport. But I agree with you. It's not going to solve your data privacy, your data protection issue. And so I appreciate that. And I think I fit that profile actually of who you just described. So I appreciate that. We are coming up on time here, and I do, like I said earlier, we've so appreciative to have you on as a guest. And again, not just any guest, but our first customer, really flagship customer guest to be on the Productivity Protected podcast. I want to just take a moment to throw the kind of mic back to you and see if there were any other thoughts for our listeners around data privacy. I mean, that's really your bailiwick and area of expertise. We don't get this opportunity very often. And if there was a message around data privacy or data protection or anything in the cyber realm that you felt was pertinent to all of our listeners around the globe, that could be helpful to them. You've given some great anecdotes here today, some great advice there at the end. If there's nothing else to add, that's fine too. But I did want to give you the floor if for any other commentaries you might have around data privacy that we did not cover that you feel are pertinent on the Productivity Protected podcast.
Sure, I'll add a couple of more things since you just started to mention. And again, no offense to anyone who golfs. It's a great sport. I just never picked it up myself. I find it hilarious when I play because the ball just goes all over the place. So, it's like I always misfire. So it's what it is. I would rather spend my time, doing something else. Used to fly planes at one point and do scuba diving. So I have a different passion for things. So anyway, that's for later. But in terms of the advice or in terms of some certain additional points that I would like to make is one is data privacy is not the responsibility just for the data privacy function. It is a responsibility for everyone who's in the organization. As an individual itself, as a consumer itself, it's your responsibility as well. When you sign up for things, when you give your things willingly, nobody really reads anything, to be honest, in terms of the terms and conditions, etc. And we are the first ones who start to complain, oh, they shared my data with everyone. Well, they said they will, and you signed up on it, right? So they will. But certain organizations do it with a lot of ethics, and certain organizations don't do it with a lot of ethics. We happen to be the one which is very ethical about it, primarily because of two things. One is the sheer number of people that we have, the customers that we have. The scale is so much, at one point, if you think about it, in the lifetime, for one or two customers out of 6 or 7 people in the world has been a Western Union customer. So if I was to go and look at our database, back in when this thing started, between retail customers, our digital customers, and the other customers, you have over 1 billion people that are listed there in some way or some form. That's a lot of people. So for us, that responsibility now just, multi-fold in a lot of ways. So we have to be responsible. The second thing is we are a financial services entity. So we have to be regulated. So the regulations obviously force us, but we have taken it on ourselves to be more than compliant, if you will, to every one of them. And then the third one is that our reputation. You walk across the road. I'm in Canada right now, in Vancouver. and I literally cross the road, I see a Western Union board. I go across another street, I see a Western Union board. If we were not doing that, would I want to do business with Western Union? So for us, the reputation of of that is extremely important as well. So consider the reputation risk as well. And then finally, the partnerships are extremely important. So you need to have the right partnerships within the organization. We are lucky enough to have a privacy officer as well as the privacy function, which is extremely pro partnerships, and they're not trying to do build stuff on their own or trying to tackle it themselves. Neither we want to do anything without their consent. So that partnership has worked really well. But in a larger organizations, that typically gets lost, and you would end up seeing multiple products being bought by different organizations, different parts of the organization for the same purpose. And one organization, I know, I'm not going to name them, when I was in my previous time, they were like, oh, we're going to run an RFP on doing scans for AI information. You call them and ask them, can they use it? Oh, we didn't even bother. So it gets lost. So before you think that you don't have, look around. You'll be surprised you actually have. And if not, know where to find the right information, what to do. Listen to this podcast. I'm happy to give you advice. Anyone who's willing to have a privacy conversation, me and Craig are always up for it. This is our Friday or Thursday one-on-one chats where we just go and talk and talk to each other about what's the next challenge that he's going to throw at us that we have to solve for him. So I always love a challenge. Happy to talk to anyone who's going through this journey and can help them, guide them on the right path. I'm not going to give you an answer who to choose, what to choose, because I call myself and mostly an unbiased person, but I have my biases as well. But I will help you through a journey where potentially you'll figure out the answer yourself. It's as simple as that.
There you have it, folks. You heard it from Harveer Singh from Western Union. What a great story from his first cash money transfer as a student to now achieving the level of chief data architect and the global head of engineering at Western Union. Done a fantastic job bringing Western Union's data privacy to a new level, and as well as a host of other areas as well. It's really been fantastic. And like I said before, an honor having you here. My only prerequisite, Harveer, for Craig, you mentioned Craig, and look forward to speaking to him, is that he must listen to this podcast, Harveer. He must listen to this podcast, and we'd love to have him on too if he's interested. We'd love to have him on. We could have you guys both on actually at the same time. That might be pretty cool as well. So we're up on time, and I appreciate again all the knowledge that you dropped. If you have any questions for Productivity Protected podcast, if you have an idea for a guest for a future episode, you can email us at podcast@pkware.com. That's podcast@pkware.com. I'm your host, Spencer Kupferman. I'm the CEO of PKWare. It's like I said, it's been great to finally get some time with you, Harveer, to chat, and look forward to many other opportunities with you and the entire Western Union team. We could have spent, I'm sure, much more time chatting here and sharing all of your knowledge in the space and our partnership. But I look forward to many more happy times together as partners and times where we're winning together, facing challenges together, and overcoming those challenges, which there's no doubt will be challenges, but we'll be together. We'll be doing it together. You have our commitment to that. I know we've demonstrated that, just as you all have as well. Looking forward to our next time together. And on behalf of all of us at the Productivity Protected podcast, this is Driving Data Privacy with Western Union's Harveer Singh. Harveer, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Spencer. I enjoyed the conversation. Like you said, we could spend another hour for sure. And we look forward to hosting you at our headquarters in Denver. So please do grace us with your presence. And we definitely want to hang out with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Harveer. Be sure to tune in. As all of them, we have fantastic guests with a lot of great content here on the Productivity Protected podcast. Please tune in. Again, I'm Spencer Kupferman. I'm here with Harveer Singh of Western Union. Thank you again, everybody, for all of you out there all over the world listening to us and tuning in. Thanks so much for your support. And thank you again, Harveer, and thank you, Western Union. We'll see you later on the Productivity Protected podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Productivity Protected. Learn more about how PKware protects data and workflows by visiting pkware.com, and join us next time for more insider info on protecting data wherever it lives and moves.